It is my great pleasure today to welcome to the Finding Ada conference Maggie Philbin, OBE, who's possibly best known for her work as a TV presenter on shows like Tomorrow's World and Bang Goes the Theory, but now also for her organisation Teen Tech, which reaches over 75,000 young people every year. Maggie, welcome.
It's great to be with you. And I do remember doing, I was trying to think of an Ada Lovelace day that I did with you. It was some time back. I was talking to somebody else who brought along a wonderful gadget, which was, and we're going back a few years now, and it was a handbag that when you got an email, it kind of, some lights on your bag changed colour. I remember thinking how impressive it was. Anyway, it is lovely to be with you. So I hope you've got people bringing you loads of things like that today.
That was, I think, actually the first Ada Lovelace Day Live.
I think it was.
2010, 2011, something like that.
Yeah, I remember it really clearly. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it, how some events really, really stay in your head, and that really did.
Excellent. So big question for you today is, how did you become a TV presenter? Was it a long-held ambition of yours, or was it just something you fell into, a stroke of luck?
It was certainly a stroke of luck, and I started. Well, I saw an ad for an extraordinary job when I was in the middle of my finals. I did an English and drama degree, and throughout the process of doing that degree, I'd already worked out I will never act. I'm simply not good enough to act. But I was quite interested in directing and production, and that's what I thought I would do. And then I saw this ad, which was a box-numbered ad. And honest to God, it said, do you want to be a top TV personality? And it listed all of the things that this paragon would be able to do, none of which, by the way, I could do. I had zero experience. But there was a little phrase in it that said, oh, would you be willing to learn? And I thought, well, I would. And I wrote a really tongue-in-cheek letter, pre-email days, and forgot about it. And then much to my astonishment, I got a phone call, I don't know, a week or so later saying, hello, it's the BBC here. We'd like to interview you. And I was so excited. And I put the phone down, and then I said to my flatmate, I didn't ask them what the job was. I still didn't know what the job was. I had no idea other than that it was a live show. So I had to go completely blind to the interview, because both I and my mate decided it would look very desperate that if I did phone them back and say, by the way, what is the job? They'll think they've told me, won't they? And Jackie said, yes, they'll surely think they've told you. So yeah, I had no idea when I pitched up for the interview that it was going to be Swap Shop, the BBC's first Saturday morning program. And I was in the middle of my finals, and it was amazingly good displacement activity. And no one was more surprised than me when they offered me the gig. Wow. And that's where it all began.
Yeah. So multicolored Swap Shop, I remember that when I was a kid. But then you spent 8 years co-presenting Tomorrow's World. How did you make that jump from what was basically kids' TV, Saturday morning TV, to a serious sort of evening TV show?
Well, what happened was that someone in the science and features department at the BBC, as it was then, happened to see me present one of the live outside broadcasts for Swap Shop, and I think I was in a cotton mill, and I was just explaining how this cotton mill worked, and he sat there watching, thinking, oh, she explains things quite well, and on the strength of this, offered me a new series called The Show Me Show. And The Show Me Show originally had been planned to be a children's show, and so we started recording these programs, and they were a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed them. And the controller of BBC One saw them and said, do you know what, I think we could try this. You know, when Tomorrow's World goes off the air in the summer, why don't we just put this in and see what happens? So that is what happened. So obviously Tomorrow's World paid keen interest to see what on earth was going in the summer slot. And after that first series finished, again, I was offered the Tomorrow's World job. But the extraordinary thing is that I hesitated. I wasn't sure that I wanted it. I mean, my blood goes cold now. But the thing about everything that I'd done to that point was that everything, obviously, it had been live. It had been quite free flowing. And I knew that Tomorrow's World was tightly scripted. And I just wasn't sure how good a fit I would be. And I think maybe like all of us, there was a little bit of worry. You know, I'm not a scientist. I love science and tech, but chemistry tripped me up at school, and that's why I didn't do veterinary science. So will this work out? And so I said, could I have a couple of weeks to think about it? I really cannot believe that I did all of this. And thankfully, I came to the right decision and decided to give it a go.
Was it a big challenge for you then to go from this live show where, you know, you have to think on the fly, you have to kind of react very immediately to what's happening around you, to this tightly scripted show? Was that a big jump?
It was a massive jump, because Tomorrow's World was also live, and that was one of the reasons they, I guess, thought that this was going to work. But it was a very, very different, and certainly when I joined the programme, I did feel like a round peg in a square hole, because it was really quite formal, and it didn't really, you know, I kind of felt I needed to make that hole a little bit rounder, which subsequently is really what I did. But it took a while. I think it took the best part really of a year to 18 months to feel comfortable with it. There was for me, a lot of learning to do it, because it was a highly technical program. And I mean that not in the obvious sense, in that it's about science and tech, but in the, if you're doing a 3-minute item, say it's in the studio, there are probably like hundreds of different shots during that item. And because it's live, it's really crucial that if you're holding something up, you're holding it in the right place and for the right amount of time for them to be able to cut. Because if you suddenly move it, then they miss the great moment of. So it took a while just to really understand, how am I going to be able to manage the technical side of all of this, whilst being able to feel like I can still be absolutely comfortable with being on air. And I worked it out in the end. I worked out what I did, and much to, I think, the initial amusement of my co-presenters, because there was autocue on Tomorrow's World, but I wouldn't use it. It was there, but I would never use it, and that was, for me, was massively helpful, because I felt that I could be me. I was using my own words.
Do you think you were treated differently as a woman on a science and tech show? And do you think it was important that you had Judith Hand there as a co-presenter, so that you weren't kind of like, you know, token woman?
Yeah, and so that's a really interesting question. And I think if I had joined Tomorrow's World when Judith joined it, which was, I don't know, 4 or 5 years earlier, that might have been very true. But there were a few things that had both changed in that period, and also I'd had a set of experiences which meant that didn't follow through for me. So obviously when I joined, Judith was there, amazing person, but so were this raft of incredible producers, researchers, female producers and female researchers and directors. And that hadn't been true 5 or 6 years previously. And so I just sort of landed in this, you know, this production office, surrounded by all of these amazing, bright women who were fantastic to work with, and who have remained lifelong friends. You know, one of them is coming round tomorrow, actually. It was a wonderful, wonderful environment. So that was, so I wasn't stepping into an environment that felt very male or very patronizing. And the other thing that I think was really helpful for me was that children's programs was the most amazing place to work. The head of children's when I was there was a woman. The person who invented Saturday morning telly and who took that massive risk with me was a woman. So I'd been in an environment with these really powerful and wonderful role models, and then I came into another environment, and that was absolutely stuffed with them as well. You know, many of the people who produced or directed on Tomorrow's World went on to be controllers at BBC One or BBC Two. They were, you know, powerhouses. So, and that, of course, you know, when that has been your only work experience, because this was all I knew from a working environment, you tended to assume it must be like this everywhere else. And of course, it wasn't. And it isn't. So I do feel like I was incredibly fortunate in that respect. But it's well worth winding the clock back, and you can go on the BBC archive and watch videos from Tomorrow's World in the 1960s or the 1970s. And the tone was very different to the programme that I loved reporting on in the 1980s and early 90s.
So that's actually quite interesting. How do you think the tone has changed between, say, Tomorrow's World and Bang Goes the Theory? Has there been an evolution?
Well, I mean, I loved working on Bang Goes the Theory. I loved my co-presenters. They're great fun. Again, they're great friends. And I was working with one of them yesterday. So that was absolutely fabulous. But the thing that was different, which was sort of interesting, was that when I worked on Tomorrow's World, it was a full-time job. And Tomorrow's World were very possessive of you. They don't like you doing anything else at all. They very much wanted you in the office. If you weren't out filming, you were expected to be in the office. I mean, I lived 70 miles away, and I got on the train and came in every day. But the reasoning behind that was that you were always able, if you weren't writing your own scripts, to be able to help other people with theirs or kick ideas around, and that meant you were really involved in everything to do with the program. And you know, nowadays it's very different from a presenting point of view, that you are certainly with Bang, you're less involved. You get sent the script. Yeah. The script has been checked by lawyers, so there isn't. I mean, I remember causing chaos on my first days filming with Bang, because I met, and obviously for the first time, Liz Bonin and Jem, and we were having a coffee in this pub, and I said, "Have you looked at this script?" And they went, "Yeah, we've looked at it." And I went, "Are you happy with what we're saying here?" And they went, "How do you mean?" And I went, "Well, I don't know. I think it might work a bit better if." So we sat in the pub, totally changed the script, and then when it came out and we did it, the director was utterly horrified that we'd messed around. All my fault. But so yeah, what I'm getting at was a different environment, and much as I loved doing it, I felt there was just something missing. I would like to have had a bit more of an involvement, really.
So for women of a certain age, and I won't say which age, you were an absolutely huge role model when you were on Tomorrow's World. Did you realize that at the time? Absolutely not. No, I never thought about it. And it's quite funny. I was aware that I had a lot of people. Sorry, can you hear my cat meowing? Yeah, fine. So we can see you. That would help. Oh, I love it. I love a good cat on a call always. Oh, they're really naughty. And what she does, which is what she's doing now, is I'm facing a
fireplace, she will either try and jump up the chimney because she knows that gets her going, or she jumps on top of the mantelpiece and tries to knock things off. And it's because I'm on a come here. It's because I'm on a call. Right, I've now totally forgotten what your question was.
We were talking about being a role model.
Oh yes, no, yeah. I was aware that some of the children who'd been watching Swap Shop had followed me over to Tomorrow's World, and that was nice because they would send me lots of what I used to call wobbly handwriting letters, and I've got some of them framed still. They're very lovely, but I never thought that I will be influencing future scientists and people who want to work in tech. That honestly didn't cross my mind, and I think it probably took maybe 5 years, 6 years after I'd stopped doing Tomorrow's World that I started bumping into people in all sorts of different places who said that the reason they were working in as a doctor or a researcher, or they'd gone to work for somewhere like Microsoft, and they said, I'm here because of you, and it honestly is the most flattering thing that anyone can say. Dame Wendy Hall said it to me, and
Wow.
and I sort of remind myself of that every so often. It makes me feel really proud, actually, but it also underlines something else, because I think sometimes in science and tech there can be an element of, particularly in programming, of snobbery about, oh well, does he or she have a science degree, or what's the background, blah blah blah. And I think having a sincere interest and making sure you know your stuff, and most of all being curious and interested in what you're doing is really important. But obsessing totally about whether or not you've got a particular degree or a PhD or whatever is a bit of a nonsense, really, because it doesn't mean that you can't help other people understand some fairly complex principles. So no, I had no idea. But it's very lovely, and I do love it, by the way, when people come and say things like that. It makes you feel very good. And if you talk to anyone, Dallas Campbell and I were talking about this yesterday, and he'd had that. I think he was doing a conference in Pharma or something this week, and he said that people came up to him and said that I'm working in this field because of you, and it does make you feel great. It is a nice thing.
So I want to just pick up on something you just said about the skills and you not needing a science degree. To me, it feels like the skills that you need are quite specific and maybe not necessarily something that you pick up when I have a science degree. I'm pretty sure that none of it would have actually helped me if I decided to go into TV. So what are the skills that you think are important for someone who wants to become a TV presenter?
I think it obviously very much depends on the area that you want to go into. But I think that authenticity is really important, and being genuinely curious and interested can really help. And I think also just being honest enough to ask the right question when you don't know, when you don't understand something, because if you don't understand it, chances are whoever's watching it doesn't quite follow either. So I think being able to do those things and is important. And I think now, if I think my telly career started in, gosh, it's a frightening amount of time ago, in 1978, where we're still using film. But now there are so many different ways that you can experiment, and you can set your own YouTube channel up. Obviously, you can think about how would you tell a story. You can, if you've got a blog, you can go interview people, and so there's loads of different ways to hone your craft and find out for yourself what it is that you enjoy doing. And I think it also means that you're you don't have to push against the doors of broadcasters to be able to tell the stories that you might want to tell.
Mm.
You can do it your own way, and see if there's an audience for what you want to do. And I think that's really exciting. I mean, I look, at some really, really young people, and I'm in awe of what they are doing and the technical skills that they're developing. And I think that's the other thing, because again, back in the day, you had a camera person, a sound operator, lighting people, and it's not like that now. You are expected to, in most instances, self-shoot, be able to edit, and those skills are really, really important. And then they also help you, and you wouldn't do exactly what I'm doing now, which is give long, rambling responses to questions, because you've got to edit them. And you learn the hard way if you're doing the editing yourself as well as the talking.
So how much did your degree in English and drama, so you studied at the University of Manchester, how much did that prepare you for your career? And do you think things have changed so much now that potential presenters are able to pick these skills up without having to go to university for it?
I definitely think you don't need to go to university to be able to present on telly. I think, again, obviously depending on the area, you need an area of interest or expertise, something you really care about, is quite helpful. And it doesn't matter whether that area of expertise is, Russian vases, or cats, or whatever. But having an area that you care about as a kickoff point is very helpful. In terms of how did my English and drama degree prepare me, as I've said, it certainly showed me what I didn't want to do, which was act. It gave me certain experiences, and at the time, I don't think I paid that much attention to it. But one thing I did enjoy, we had this wonderful studio space, the Stephen Joseph Studio at Manchester University. And that was an area where on Monday nights, anybody could, you could do your own stuff, basically. And for a while I was in, it was sort of like a quasi, improvisation group. And I remember doing one show and making the audience laugh. And that was a really good feeling. And that was only by being myself. So I think that maybe subconsciously I picked up certain hints and tips, but I wouldn't say that going and doing an English and drama degree gave me any presenting skills. And it was interesting because when I was so fortunate in that when I got that very first job, that Rosemary Gill actually said, look, I don't want you watching anyone and trying to copy them or think that you've got to be like Valerie Singleton, who was at the BBC at the time, because we've hired you because we really like you. So we just want you to be yourself, and we know you're going to make mistakes, and that's fine, as long as you don't keep making the same one. But you've got a lot of learning to do, and that's fine. But please don't think you've got to be anything other than you. And that was a very powerful thing to say to someone, that they liked me and they wanted me to be me. So that was just very, very reassuring. And I think that was the authenticity bit. And maybe, as again I've alluded to, is the thing that troubled me slightly when I began work on Tomorrow's World, was I wanted to be authentic. And I in those early months on Tomorrow's World, I kept thinking, I'm not being authentic. I need to find how to do me, but within the the slight restrictions of this program. And once I'd sussed how to do that, it was like this world opened. And I really did feel like I had come home, because I did a lot of learning while I was in children's. I had 4 years of working with 3 very different people, but who were all brilliant at what they did. And I did watch them in terms of looking at how they handled certain situations. And it taught me how to get out of trouble. And it also taught me that when things go wrong, that's not necessarily a bad thing. That sometimes that's the moment that people most enjoy. So obviously that stood me in very good stead on our world, where things frequently didn't quite pan out as you might expect. So I just think I in terms of where did I sort of learn how to do it, I think I just had an incredibly sensitive editor in Rosemary Gill, who really, she couldn't have got 4 more different people together than Noel Edmonds, John Craven, Keith Chegwin, and me. We were so different, but we loved working together and we helped each other. And that was the other thing as well, in terms of, because there's a thing about, what are the qualities that might be useful that make people want to hire you if you want to work on telly. But there's also, why do you want to do this thing in the first place, which is absolutely nerve-wracking, where frequently you feel completely out of control. And, why do you want to do it? And the answer for me was always, I really loved being part of that team. Mm. I loved the outside broadcast, especially, where the impossibility of being in some, far-flung corner of the UK and watching everyone, cable bash and get everything set up, and the sheer impossibility sometimes, because I never lost the sense of, gosh, it's almost magical at times that we can stand in this field. And those pictures are going all over the UK, and I love, because obviously an outside broadcast is more complicated than in a studio. Everything's there, but outside broadcast, you've got to take everything there and get everything set up and hope signals work, and that that you've got good talk back, so that you've got some idea of what people are saying to you in the studio. I'm a nightmare to interview, by the way. I should have pointed that out, because literally I never stop. And by the way, that was, because I did ask Rosemary many years after, why did you take that risk on me? Why did you give me the job? And she said, well, we asked you one question, which is, where did you get your boots from? And you talked for 35 minutes. We thought maybe you'd be all right on Saturday morning. She was very brilliant. I loved Rose.
So you definitely, said you learned a lot through the process of doing Multicolour Swap Shop and then Tomorrow's World, which almost makes this question a bit redundant. But is there anything that you know now that you wish you'd known then? Any sort of like key things that would have made life just that little bit easier?
I think it probably is to do with confidence, and this stems back, and it's got nothing to do with working in telly really. It's to do with your understanding of sort of like the world of work. So as I was growing up as a kid and a teenager, and when I had conversations with my parents about what might I do, my dad was very happy when he thought I was going to be a doctor or a vet, and less happy when I said I wanted to do English and drama. But when I was having those conversations, it was very much around, who will you go and work for? My dad worked for the Co-op. Who will you go and work for? And what will be a safe job, and will there be a pension? And that was sort of the level of the conversation. And something that never entered the conversation was that you might consider doing your own thing, setting up your own company, having an idea and recognizing an opportunity, and that was just not in absolutely not in my frame of, and it wasn't in my parents' frame. So I think if I were to wind the clock back, I would love to have just had that little bit of insight that I could set up my own thing, whatever that might have been back then. And I mean, it's been such an exciting journey now with Team Tech that I do sometimes reflect of, well, what have I done this even earlier? That would have been a good thing to do, but it absolutely didn't enter my head that I could. Yeah, so I wish I'd been encouraged to be a little bit more entrepreneurial.
Yeah. So to go back to the skills, I think there's a lot of ways that people can develop the skills that are needed for TV presenting. How useful is it to do things like your own YouTube channel or being on TikTok? Does that give you the right kind of experience, or is there more that you need to do?
I think it certainly gives you a very useful set of experiences, because the great thing about doing something for social media channels like that is that you will get feedback, and you can tell whether or not people like stuff. I mean, I'm still interested, so, and I'm sure you'll be the same. Is that something as simple as you might tweet something, and it's just like tumbleweed. You say something, and then you suddenly, there's however many, 300-400 likes, and you think, well, that's just so weird. Why did that seem to really resonate? And so from that point of view, I think aside from just learning, I'm watching yourself back and thinking, oh, is that a bit irritating? Maybe I shouldn't do that. So I think there is lots of learning, but then I think there's deeper work to be done as well. I think there are some really good, I mean, if journalism is your thing, there are some really good courses, and journalism courses are well worth doing. I mean, great ones at Cardiff and Birmingham, for instance, because I think that can really help you understand. It can be a very useful shortcut, and it can also save you ending up in court for defamation. So I think that those things are worth investing in, and that gives you another set of skills.
So slightly weirdly, something that isn't I don't mention that often. I actually used to do stand-up comedy back in the 90s, and it was brilliant, but it was absolutely terrifying. And in the end, the terror won. These days, there's just like, you can do courses on improv, you can learn comedy from Steve Martin on masterclass.com. There's all these opportunities that weren't there in the 80s, or frankly, even the 90s. How does one decide the details of what direction you want to go in? So like, how did you know that acting wasn't for you and that presenting was?
Well, I mean, it was as simple as I was surrounded when I was at Manchester. At that time, there were only 2 drama departments in the UK, Bristol and Manchester. So there were a lot of really good people in my year, and the year above me, and the year below me. And I'm quite an honest person with myself, and I could see these people had got real talent when it came to performing, different kinds of performers, character actors, or you mentioned stand-up. I mean, Rick Mail and Ade Edmondson were in the year below me at Manchester. So I kind of was sensible enough to look and think, no, I am simply not that good at that. And then thinking about, what do I enjoy doing, and then that did help me understand, well, I love, and again, I don't suppose I thought about it at the time, but like bringing together a group of talent. So the last thing I did at Manchester was actually, it was a short play, but I brought Ade Edmondson and Rick Mail, and then someone called Tom Watson, who you might not know, but he was on EastEnders, and yeah, so a whole group of people together. So I thought, actually, I'd have made a decent casting director. so yeah, and that was, and I was doing that at the time that I found out that I was being interviewed for this mysterious program.
So things have changed a lot since the 80s, obviously. How do people get into TV now? Like, say you've done the courses, you've done the YouTube channel and the TikTok, and you want to step up into TV. What's the route in?
I think there are some very different routes in now. The BBC and the BBC do this in conjunction with Channel 4, and I think ITV, but I might be wrong about that. But that fantastic apprenticeship schemes, and those apprenticeship schemes are in every which area. So in technology, in journalism, in accountancy, if that's what you want to do, and in all sorts of different areas of broadcast. I think that is a really good way in. And some of those apprenticeships are degree apprenticeships. So you're in the great position of being able to earn a little bit of money whilst you're training, and confident in the knowledge that the training you're receiving is absolutely of the moment, which I think is quite hard to do. I mean, I would never encourage anyone to do a media studies degree, and I apologize to anyone who's either done that or is teaching one, but purely because it is hard to keep completely current, because you've got to produce your schemes of work. And unlike with the BBC apprenticeship scheme, they wrote years 1 and year 2, but they didn't write year 3 and year 4 then, because they knew that was going to change. It would be different because it's a fast moving industry. So that is a good way in, I think. And it also gives you a sense, because I'm always interested when people go, I'd like to be a presenter, because as I told you, I kind of fell into it. It wasn't a lifelong thing. And there are so many other jobs which are incredibly rewarding, more rewarding, particularly now, than being on screen. You've got more control over your destiny. So I think that that route, which gives you an opportunity to look around, see, get an understanding of all of the different jobs that there are. Some amazing jobs in sort of future media within the BBC. Some really exciting areas where they're experimenting with the what will be happening in the next 10 or 20 years of broadcast. So that would be what I would be doing now. I think.
And if you have your science or tech degree or engineering, and you want to sort of progress into TV, how does that happen? Like, how do people, like, if you have a specific idea, say about, it'd be really great to do, I don't know, it's a fantastic series about women in science and technology, pulling that one out of the air for no good reason. How do you then get that moving and get the attention of TV execs when you actually have an idea like that?
See, that's a very good question. I think sometimes there's a bit of a black art involved. but to be serious, one of the things which is a useful thing to do is to understand what the channel commissioners are actually looking for, because they'll look for different things at different times. And so if, for instance, they're looking for a new science cross history program, and what you want to do is something based on space, and they're not really interested in anything in space, then you're kind of banging on a door which is going to take a little bit of opening. But finding out, and it's not difficult to find out what the commissioners are looking for, and then thinking, would I like, have I got any ideas that would work in that space? And then obviously sometimes you've got a compelling idea, a really compelling idea. And I think, going to approaching either an independent production company, do a little bit of homework to see what kind of work different companies do, because some specialize in entertainment, others are more factual, and just going and talking to someone there would, I mean, it's a very simple and perhaps an incredibly obvious thing to do. I mean, stalk people in a nice sort of way on, because again, social media makes it quite easy to make connections. And so ask people, because I mean, Channel 4 may have completely different processes to the ones that I'm talking about. So it's like, if you see someone and, do a search, look at, for, people producing shows and for Channel 4, and ask them and say, I've got this idea. Don't tell them too much about your idea till you know that, they're the person you want to be talking to. But yeah, that's what I would do. And people are generally quite good at coming back.
Yeah. So there are some really amazing women presenting science and TV, science and tech shows at the moment. Liz Bonin, Gillian Buck, Helen Chersky. It still kind of feels like women aren't reaching the same heights as men. Like, it's hard to say who is the female David Attenborough or Brian Cox. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think Liz Bonin is amazing, and I think she does have a very, very strong profile. In terms of why, if you think that Liz doesn't cut through in the same way as David, I think there is an answer to that, which is to do with the kind of world at the moment that we operate in. Someone like David Attenborough had the massive advantage, as did I actually, of living and working in an era with a limited number of television channels. So there was very little choice about what people watched. So, if you're doing something on one of those channels, BBC 1, 2, or 3 and 4, then chances are people would know, even if they didn't watch it, but they know that you were doing it. So, you did cut through. And the other thing, which is something I really care about actually, is that with science and tech shows, what often tends to happen is that the length of a series is really short. I mean, that was absolutely the case with Bang Goes the Theory. It was 8 programs a year. Now, they were great to do, and the content was wonderful, and the production values were really high, and the stories were really good, but it's only 8. Whereas back in the day with Tomorrow's World, it was 40. And it went out, as you know, on a Thursday night at 7:30 for 40 weeks a year for nearly 40 years. So that that does enable someone to really build a profile. Yeah. And so I think that we are in a multi-channel age. We're in a in fact, it's not even that we're in an age of channels, because we are, it's self-chosen content from whatever source, whether it is on a conventional telly or whether, you're accessing things, online or using Netflix or whatever you're doing. But you're making your own choices. And so again, it's harder, I think, for certain things to cut through in that space. But the main thing is that same place, same time.
Yeah.
Because people probably would, if you said, can you name a female newsreader, you probably could do that, because Sophie Rayworth is on the news every single day.
Yeah.
Week off. And so that I think is the difference in terms of profile.
Yeah, no, that's a really, really good point. I've not thought of it like that. So I want to move on to Teen Tech. You launched Teen Tech in 2008, and you have been doing amazing work to get teens interested in science and engineering. Can you just tell us a little bit about what Teen Tech is and what it does?
Well, it is a way of bringing the world of science and tech to life for young people in a way that they actually care about it and are enthused by it. I always felt that I only really understood just how huge the world of technology was and could be when I started work on Tomorrow's World. And so really, Teen Tech is a way of bringing Tomorrow's World to young people at a time when they may be sort of thinking about, an area that they might be interested in going into. And the other thing that we do is because it's not enough to go, there's this amazing, exciting, world of science and tech. It's relatively easy, I think, to enthuse young people about science and tech. But the tougher job is helping them genuinely believe that they both could do well in those fields and would actually want to. Because if you don't want to do something, you're pushing a massive rock up a hill. So yeah, with Teen Tech, we start where the kids are, whether they are 8 years old or 18 years old, with what they care about, what they're interested in, and then help them see how, well, if you're really interested in, and it doesn't matter whether it's tattoos or football or whatever you're interested in, there is always a link to science and tech and careers in those areas. So that's what we do. And it's so, because obviously we've done it for a long time now. I never imagined when we did the first one that nearly 13 years later we would still be at it. But it's been fantastic over that time to see young people who were perhaps, not only undecided about their direction in life, but perhaps being, one of the more, challenging students in their class, to see what they're doing now, and and to have had the privilege really of, for a period of time joining them on their journey, where they realized just how good they were and how good they could be. And I suppose the other thing I'd say about Teen Tech is that my mission, in a sense, is to put ourselves out of business, because I really want the whole school curriculum to change so that it better suits more young people and their talent and the real needs of the future, because I don't think our education system is really doing that at the moment. And this isn't knocking teachers, because I think, teachers are my heroes. They are amazing. But I do think that a lot of the assessment that goes on, particularly, what I would think was almost superfluous attention assessment, is quite bonkers and quite destructive, and it gets in the way of learning as opposed to promoting it. I'll get off my little box now, shall I?
I quite agree.
Yeah, but that's what I want to do. I want to change things in schools, because then there wouldn't be any need for Teen Tech. At the moment we're doing the stuff which I think it would be great to have it happening in schools all the time, not just for a small period of time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So do you think the teens that you work with, do they think of you as a TV personality? Do you think they look at you and go, "Ooh, I think I might go into TV," or is this
no,
not at all?
No, not at all. No, not at all. It's quite interesting. Some of them, might know me from Bang. That is true. But their teachers know me, but they don't. And so that I've always been very careful with Teen Tech in the student facing side of it. We've got some amazing people in science and tech, some of them really well known, like, you know, Dallas Campbell and Kate Russell, who are the student facing part of Teen Tech. And, you know, I do some stuff, but really my role is to make things happen, think of the program, think of the strategy, work with the teachers and the sponsors and the companies and the councils, and do all of that sort of work, really. So the kids don't think of me as you know, as a TV personality at all. It's quite funny. I always remember at one of the events, a kid coming up to me and saying, "Maggie, why does my teacher keep going bright red whenever he talks?" Funny.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. And I had the really scary thing, because I for a while I've had sometimes at events kids coming up and saying, "Could you sign this for my mum or my dad?" But not so long ago I had someone coming up saying, "Could you sign this for my granddad?" And I thought, oh dear, things are marching on now.
Fantastic. So what's coming up for you? What are you really excited about and looking forward to, apart from obviously, you know, the end of the pandemic?
It is all of the work that we're doing with Teen Tech. I never expected it would become the absolute driving force of you know, everything that I'm doing. 13 years ago, I thought we were running one event, and you know, everything stemmed from there. But it is genuinely, for me, it feels like the most important thing I've ever done, and that includes things like Tomorrow's World. I see what happens, the change that is affected in some of the young people, and sometimes in a whole school, when they adopt a slightly different attitude to the way they approach some of the things that they're sort of making happen in, you know, within the school, and that is very exciting to see. So yeah, we've got you know, obviously, like everyone, we're working virtually. So since last September, we've run more than 120 live events, and they vary in size. But you know, hopefully, come the autumn, we'll be stepping into a more hybrid approach, and then to see how safe, basically, that proves to be. But there are some very exciting plans ahead, both within the UK and globally for Teen Tech. And for me, it's you know, working with an amazing team, because I've built this, you know, wonderful team. That is, for me, really, really thrilling. And you know, when we sort of bat ideas around about what we could do, and we're always ambitious, both on behalf of the students and in the way that we deliver our materials. So so that is what makes me get up in the morning.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Mag. It's been a fascinating conversation.
Well, it's lovely to chat. It really is lovely to chat. Thank you. And it's great to be part of this day again.
Excellent. Thank you.